Hello, I'm Kirsty Lang and this is the Front Row podcast from the BBC. Hello, tonight we pick out the best children's books this Christmas and review This Is England 88, a new TV spin-off series of the Shane Meadows film. But we start with the Oscar-winning actress Meryl Streep. She's now starring in a film about the life of Britain's first woman Prime Minister, which opens in cinemas in early January. The Iron Lady starts in the present with Margaret Thatcher in her 80s. Her husband Dennis has been dead for several years, and her daughter Carol is increasingly concerned by her elderly mother's failing memory. When asked about the London bombings at a dinner party, it becomes clear that Lady Thatcher is confused.
How would you have dealt with this if you had been Prime Minister?
Where?
The bombings, Mummy. We were just talking about them.
No, yes, we have always lived alongside evil, but it has never been so patient, so avid for carnage, so eager to carry innocence along with it into oblivion.
Prime Minister made a very good statement, I thought.
Yes, clever man. Quite a smoothie.
The Iron Lady then takes us right back to Thatcher's childhood in Grantham, where she helped out in her father's grocery shop. The young Maggie is played by actress Alexandra Roach. Meryl Streep takes over at the point when she becomes Education Secretary and begins to make her bid for leadership of the Tory party.
Teachers cannot teach when there is no heating, no lighting in their classrooms. And I ask the right honourable gentleman, whose fault is that?
Your hypocrisy. Methinks the right honourable lady doth screech too much.
If the right honourable gentleman could perhaps attend more closely to what I am saying, rather than how I am saying it, he may receive a valuable education in spite of himself.
The screeching accusation was one of the factors that led to Thatcher's makeover. In the film, we see her getting voice training and clothes advice. The time span and subject matter covered by the Iron Lady makes it an epic role, a natural for Meryl Streep, who has been nominated for an Oscar an astonishing 16 times. She's won twice for Sophie's Choice and Kramer vs. Kramer. The producer of The Iron Lady, Damien Jones, said he thought of casting Meryl Streep after seeing her playing the terrifying magazine editor in The Devil Wears Prada. I asked Streep what her reaction had been when she was offered the Thatcher role.
Yes, that was my first thought. Because I thought, well, there is no other woman leader who looms so large in last century, or this one. I was very intrigued to read what the take would be, because I knew that opinion was very deep and vehement on both sides of the argument about her and her policies and what place she'd had in the evolution of both of our economies.
Because the film starts in the present, doesn't it? So Lady Thatcher is living on her own. She's still mourning Dennis even after all these years. She's lucid for most of the time, but clearly suffering from some sort of memory impairment, dementia, Alzheimer's. She is a woman looking back on her life and looking back at the loss of power.
Yes, and that was sort of the part that intrigued me the most, and that's the part that's completely imagined on our part, because we don't know the day-to-day. But I'm interested in older ladies. Women are undervalued in society, and older ladies are sort of the least interesting to, certainly, the movie audience. So it intrigued me that this film would have an ambition to look back. It's that moment in life where the walls between the present day and the past are sort of more permeable. But I have to say, I experience things like this all the time. I'm sitting here and I'm very aware that the waiter just came in and brought our coffee, and at the same time I'm thinking, oh God, if I have coffee and I haven't really eaten anything, I'm going to fall over because I have jet lag. What was the question? And here I am on the radio thinking 25 different things, and also, have I met her before? Because she's so familiar. And our lives, our inner lives are so much more complicated, and I think just the skin gets thinner over time, and the ability to shut out things and let others enter, it gets more difficult. So I can relate to this. It's a road we'll all be on soon.
Another thing that struck me when I was watching the film, I went to university when Thatcher first came to power, and obviously, all university students hated her, and it was the miners' strike, and there was huge unemployment. And then I became a news reporter, and one of my first stories that I covered was the Lockerbie bombing. And she came to the site on that Scottish hillside the day after the plane had come down, and all the press rushed to stand in front of it, and camera crews and so on. And I was a radio reporter, and I went forward, and I got knocked over by a TV cameraman and sent flying down the hill. And Thatcher stopped the whole thing, waded through these banks of crews, leant down, put her hand out and said, "Young lady, help me up," brushed me off, and then ticked off all the men around, because they were mainly men. And I had these huge mixed emotions, because this was a woman who, as I say, most people felt quite hostile to, and yet there was this moment of humanity. She was helping me woman to woman. And watching your portrayal of her in the film, I thought you do manage to get both of those sides, and that's not easy.
Well, I think life is very complicated. People are much more complicated than we imagine. And it's the potential in that makes a story worth telling. I just have been raising money we're trying to build a National Women's History Museum in Washington, D.C. And I just recently gave my salary for the Thatcher movie to that cause. And I had assembled a bunch of groundbreakers to take a picture in Washington, and among them was Madeleine Albright, and she said to me, I didn't agree with any of her policies. She said, but she was the only one who stood up with us in Bosnia. And she said, I'll never forget it. She said, I know what it's like to be the first.
Do you think it helps portraying Thatcher that you are an outsider, an American? Because, of course, there have been some voices raised to say, why isn't a British actress doing this? But actually, a British actress might have come with some baggage. Do you think it's easier when you come from the outside?
Well, the interesting thing about Thatcher was that she came from the outside. She entered a world that she wasn't supposed to be in. And I very much felt that way when I walked into the first rehearsal, and there were 45 of the finest British actors, all hideously well prepared to play all the characters, the ministers and military people that they were going to portray. And I really did feel like, oh my God, a real phony. But they made me feel so welcome. They were absolutely great, but I had that sense of what it must have felt like to walk into Parliament for her, those first days. It must have been something. Because
there were some great scenes that you do in Parliament. I mean, for instance, when she's Education Secretary and she's standing there with, everybody roaring at her. That must have been quite scary doing that scene, wasn't it?
It was very scary doing it, but the scariest thing was the second day of shooting. We shot the scene where she humiliates Geoffrey Howe, right at the end, the downfall.
In front of all the cabinet. And she's horrible. Horrible to him.
Yes. She's uber Thatcher. What the left imagined her to be all along the way. But to me, it's just such a great story about what it takes to be a leader, what it takes to stand up to that level of disdain, hatred, contempt every day, unrelentingly, and to take it and to morph it into your own agenda and get stuff done. I think it's sort of amazing and horrifying. And so that moment, the second day of shooting, when we sort of basically shot her, it was sort of a bath of fire. And it was weirdly, even though I was browbeating Phillida, how could you do this to me? Shoot this the first day. It was good that we started that way, because everything else seemed a little bit easier.
Let's talk about your preparation. You've got the voice. How did you do it?
Well, I thought I'd have a lot more time to prepare, because I felt, some jobs demand a lot and some don't. And this one I thought, shooting in February, I thought, well, I better start getting ready in October. But a series of events happened in my life, and my husband had a couple of operations, and my best friend died, and it was the Christmas from hell, and I didn't prepare. I was trying to read as much as I could. I read John Campbell's book and Hugo Young and Woodrow Wyatt's diaries, which were hilarious. But I really couldn't work on her. I was doing all the sort of back work, but not the interior work, the generative work, the work that you bring into the rehearsal hall. I didn't have time.